What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another Salt and Pauper video. It has been a minute, and we are checking in with lots of updates to the Pauper format. Several things have happened in the last couple of months, and we are going to talk about it. And by we, I mean myself, and as always, friend of the channel, Josh, aka Mayo on the internet, is joining us to talk about it. What's up, Josh?
Hello, it's me, the ever-loved mayonnaise.
You are my favorite condiment on a sandwich. Anyway, we are going to jump right in. We have lots to talk about today. We are going to start by kind of a look back, a nod to Aetherdrift. We didn't actually put out our set review in time for the release of the set, so instead we're going to take a look back at the cards that have seen play and kind of talk about the impact that Aetherdrift has had. So we're going to take a little bit of a different angle at it. Admittedly, Aetherdrift has not had a huge impact on Pauper constructed in general, but a couple standout cards, some more than others. We are going to start with a little bit more of a fringe playable. This is Chitin Gravestalker. It is a 5 generic 1 black. Insect Warrior 5/4, and it costs 1 less for each artifact and or creature in your graveyard, and it has cycling 2. So, Josh, you want to talk about this, where it's seeing play, what it's doing, and if we should expect to see more, or is this kind of a passing fad, just a testing slot?
This was a card that I think was really good when you could run a certain black draw spell that relied on artifacts that you could put artifacts in your graveyard for. But I don't think it's going to be making any sort of
Village Rites.
It was definitely an exciting card to see when it was previewed. It seemed much better than that 5/5 Death Touch.
Yeah, Writhing Necromass, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the cycling wasn't bad on it either. Although it didn't cost 1, so it was never going to make it into the Cycle Storm. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I think that was probably where most people expected this to end up, and I think it's where it saw the only real amount of play that it did see. But I actually like this card as a swap-in for like Jund Dredge with cycling and the ability to just have kind of its own Tolarian Terror / Gurmag Angler kind of thing. And it did see a little bit of play in those style of like Dread Return lists, and it's pretty good. But I don't think we're going to see a ton from this card unless those type of strategies really have some sort of renaissance or a huge impactful like reanimation spell or something kind of meaningful shake up that archetype. It seems like it's kind of run its course. It's a little bit burnt out of the current meta as it goes. But the meta is definitely still shifting as of this time. The ban and restricted announcement for Pauper is live, so we do have 3 bans and 2 unbans that are currently shaking up the format. We will talk about those a little bit later, though. Yeah. Next up, we have Grimbauble. This is, no secret. This is definitely one of the kind of highlight cards from Aetherdrift. This is a 1 black artifact. When it ETBs, it gives target creature an opponent controls -2/-2 until end of turn. You can pay 3, tap it, sacrifice it, and surveil 2. You're never doing that. You are bouncing it and replaying it over and over with things like Glinthawk and Skyfisher, and it really did kind of breathe some life into Mardu Synthesizer or Orzhov kind of flicker style decks, and it's a really powerful card in those strategies. Unfortunately, with the meta as it was, with Glee and Kuldotha really kind of suffocating those mid-rangey value style decks with few recursive threats, really didn't have much many ways to enter the format. And now that those have shifted, now that the meta is kind of settling after the ban announcements, I think there's a lot more opening for these style of decks to show up again. I've already seen some murmurs of Mardu Synthesizer popping back up, running this card. Josh, I know you were testing white-black for a little bit. Did this card stand out to you in those type of strategies? Do you think that there's room for this to make it back in? Or has the meta kind of moved past this at this point?
No, so I think that the format has actually gotten a little bit more friendly towards this card. This lost... It didn't have great value when your opponent had just a swarm that they were hitting you with. 1/1s and 2/2s and whatnot.
Sure.
But now they're all 2/2s or 2 toughness creatures that they have to actually spend mana on.
Right.
So I want to say...
Yeah, with Kuldotha Rebirth gone, this definitely gained value.
Yeah, so this...
You have to actually spend cards to play creatures now.
I know, right? No wonder red sucks. No, red's still pretty good, but this... They do have to shift. I think that this card, though, it fits very well into the slot for the novice inspectors in the Martyr list, or the Orzhov list too.
Sure.
Because this just does exactly what you want to. Like, usually you want to just draw another card, but most of the time, if it's a removal spell, you're really happy, and then this just skips the draw part. So.
Well, speaking of this doing kind of what you want it to do, right? In this meta right now, red is moving more of an angle towards things like Kessig Flame Breather, Thermo Alchemist, and the Burn package. It is, of course, running, Goblin Tomb Raider and some things that this can pick off, but it seems like more of their impactful creatures are kind of going to be immune to Grim Bobble, at least one copy of Grim Bobble. Outside of that... and maybe the mirror where you're picking off things like Glinthawk, what do you think is in the meta that this really shines against? I suppose it can pick off an Arbor Elf against Ramp, but against things like, a meta full of late game bombs like Chrysalis and Avenging Hunters, and even like Elves doesn't particularly care about this card unless you're picking off some incredibly high value pieces really early.
Yep.
I think a lot of it just kind of swarms around this card or brute forces through it. So where do you think that this really shines in this meta? Is there a deck you're targeting with this, or is it just kind of generally good and you make do?
No, I think this is just a generally good card. Like, you can absolutely take this out once you get to the sideboard, but this is very much a reusable... what's that? One black starts with a D. Disfigure.
Deadly Dispute.
Close. It's an artifact Disfigure that sticks around that you can maybe never use its second ability for.
That's fair. And it is worth saying this can pick off like Karklan Shaman or something.
Yeah, and so the relevance of this is you just always you always want it early, and it doesn't hurt later. Like, you can just swing.
Sure.
Not that it's relevant or too relevant to the argument, but if your opponent has a creature that's within 2 toughness and that can block your dude, you always have that threat of killing theirs, and so you're usually going to sneak 2 damage in just because this card exists. So. And
I do think there's a little bit more context in the meta currently. Boggles is kind of on the rise again, so it's definitely not going to be great into matchups like that. But this kind of brings me to my next point about this card, where without Kuldotha in the meta, even though Writhing Chrysalis exists, I think Tithing Blade goes up in value. And while it might not be like the premium removal it was before Writhing Chrysalis came onto the scene, I think we are getting back to a place where that sort of value, things like Accursed Marauder, Tithing Blade, those Edict effects, do have a little more to offer right now, now that Kuldotha isn't around to just flood the board with tokens. So that is something to keep an eye out for, just in general when you're evaluating your local meta. Boggles is on the upswing, so have a plan for that.
Yeah. But overall, I really love Grim Bobble.
Yeah, it's a good card. Next up is the standout card from the set. Grim Bobble was maybe a close second. This is undeniably the card that has seen the most play in Pauper since it was released. This is Packdoll Terror. This is a 3/4 artifact creature toy For 4, 3 and a black gets you whenever this creature or another artifact you control enters, each opponent loses 1 and you gain 1. This card is an absolute house. The effect stacks, lots and lots of value packed onto a fairly reasonable costed artifact, especially if you're using things like the 3 mana that discounts artifacts or some sort of familiar discount. What is it? Foundry Inspector, I think, is the one that a lot of decks were playing earlier on. Yep. Then it kind of took a swing and actually ended up being a 4 of in the Mono Black Gardens list that won Pauper-Geddon. So it's definitely earned its place in Pauper play at the moment. Now, that being said, again, the meta has shifted pretty dramatically over the last couple of weeks. Not sure if this will stand the test of time, but it is definitely a card to be aware of. And if something like, as weird as it sounds, the Steelfin Whale, Refraction Helix combo ends up coming back, this could certainly be a way that deck wins, which is really interesting. I think that there's a couple different ways this card could go. Obviously, you have things like Altertron still around, and maybe even getting better with the reintroduction of Prophetic Prism. But so far, the decks running this card have kind of been pushed out, and it's kind of unclear whether or not it's going to come back into a new shell. Josh, do you have any ideas for where this card might fit? Maybe in one of those Mardu synthesizer lists, or an Orzhov Glinthawk style deck or something like that, maybe? Or do you have a different idea in mind for this?
I don't have anything brewing at the moment for this, but this is just perfectly statted and costed, and I want to say colored with the relevant types in that it can just fit into either a combo or mid-range deck. And that ability to fit into to these those more than one type of deck at a time means that this card is always going to be a consideration. Whenever I'm building one of those, I'm going to be like, all right, well, I mean, is this a home for Backdoll? I'm never going to not look at it.
And I think it is important to note that, this, with Koldatha having to change gears, Galvblast is seeing significantly less play, which means 4 toughness is a meaningful number again. It's no longer just dies to the best removal in the format. This card is Snuff Out proof, which is another premium removal, and it doesn't die to Galvblast because nobody's playing it, or at least way fewer people are playing it. So chances of this sticking and actually getting value from things like a Blood Fountain or some sort of really big kind of dump your hand or make a bunch of tokens turn to follow this up, it's much more likely this card sticks around to see that. So definitely worth picking up a playset just to have in case this card ends up swinging back into the meta, but certainly good enough to be worth a card slot in some of the decks coming through.
Also, it probably looks insane in foil.
It does. Speaking of looking insane in foil, I have another card coming up that also has a fire foil.
But definitely the most exciting.
This was a card that a lot of people were excited about when Aetherdrift was previewed. This is Magmakin Artillerist. This is a 1/4 for 3. 2 in a red, gets you an Elemental Pirate that says whenever you discard 1 or more cards, this creature deals that much damage to an opponent. Very simple. And then it also has cycling for a red and a colorless, and it says when you cycle this card, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. But we're not really concerned with the cycling ability. We're concerned with the other bit. Now, this being a 1/4, again, with Galvblast seeing a downtick, definitely a more relevant stat line than it was when the Aetherdrift first released. Whether or not that really makes the difference, it has yet to be seen. I personally haven't seen anyone kind of circle back to testing this card and this combo yet. There are 2 variants of this combo, but the obvious one is Ophidian Eye, which is a 3 mana flash blue enchantment that says whenever this creature deals damage, draw a card. All you need with that 2 pieces together is some sort of a discard outlet. It can be, whatever you want. There are tons of free discard options in Pauper. There's at least a couple that I can think of, but Essentially what happens is you discard, you ping them, you draw, you discard, you ping them, you draw, and you keep looping until they're dead. It's a 2.5, 3-card combo. It's a 2-card combo if you can get to your discard phase with 8 cards in hand, because the cleanup phase does not allow you to progress until your hand is under 7, and each time you discard, you draw a new one, so you just keep going, and as long as you have more cards in library than they have life, they die. Very interesting combo. I haven't seen a ton of talk about it since the format started rotating after the bans, but definitely one to keep an eye on, and a lot of people were excited for it when it was first previewed. Interesting that it has yet to really make a debut. Obviously, it was kind of overshadowed by Glee Combo, but Josh, what do you have in the tank for this one? I think that there might be something here. I know everybody is really excited about the High Tide unban, and everybody's comboing around High Tide and brewing around High Tide and trying, but this is another one of those 2-ish card combos that really does seem like it might be strong enough if someone cracks the code on the right shell for it.
Yeah, and you can't ever count out a 2-mana combo.
2 card. It's not 2 mana.
Well, it is with 2 familiars. The black guy out. The
Nightscape Familiar. Yeah, that's how you do it. Grixis.
2 Nightscape Familiars out, which I may have shown my hand on that. Whoops. But I do like how it's just the 2 cards, and it can be so simple as to just. I lost my words. It's simple in that there's 2 cards, and I like how it's easy enough to put together. There's redundancy in the Soul Bond card as well.
Yep, I was just going to mention that. And it's important that Soul Bond also costs 3, which means that both of these cards are available to use Unearth on, which is kind of the direction I think you're going, which is a Grixis shell for this, which is really interesting. I also kind of like this option, and maybe an Izzet, almost Splinter Twin, almost a Splinter Twin esque deck where you just play a whole bunch of cheap cantrips and cheap interaction, and then you kind of land this dude protected, and then flash in Ophidian Eye at end of turn and try to combo off right away. It's really interesting. I think there's a lot of brewing potential around this card and the combo shell that it fits in. There's a lot of options for how to go off with this card. So I do think that this card is worth keeping an eye on. It's not necessarily if it'll show up, it's just kind of when someone cracks it. Or maybe they print one more card that combos with it and it makes it just a little bit better, and that's all it needs to push over the edge. But it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Keep a play set of Ophidian Eyes and Magmakin Artillerists and maybe the Soulbound dude as well in your playables box, just off in the corner until it resurfaces, just so you have them ready to go. But it's definitely an interesting card.
Yeah, and I do want to make a slight note as well towards the efficacy of the combo. Everyone knows you can't put a spell or effect on the stack manually in the end step unless there's something to respond to, or in the cleanup step. So there is actually a case to where you can deal more damage than the cards in your library if you have an instant speed shuffle back in.
Yeah.
So it can deal more than that number.
Of course. And I guess I should explain the line to winning during the cleanup step. So you actually create the priority to play the Ophidian Eye with Flash with this card's ability. So essentially discarding your card puts a trigger on the stack, which allows you the priority to then flash in Ophidian Eye to trigger this effect off of the first discard, which triggers Ophidian Eye to draw a new card, which starts the discard cycle. So that's kind of how you're building your own priority in the end step, which is really interesting because you can pass to cleanup with 9 cards in hand, 8 cards in hand, and make your opponent act without committing the combo. And then if they act, you can either protect it and then go for it, or you can, if they choose not to act, you don't have to go for it. You can just discard something, let this trigger and not pull the trigger on the Ophidian Eye if they have mana up, or if you get the sign that, maybe it's not the time, or maybe they have too many lands untapped or something. So it's really interesting, the options, the avenues that this allows you in terms of when you actually have to commit the combo. And it definitely allows you to try to induce misplays from an opponent where you get to try to make them give up information or maybe react prematurely without you having to commit to going for the combo with the enchantment. So definitely interesting one to keep an eye on. Wrapping up Aetherdrift, we have finally a land that has seen exactly 0 play that I'm aware of, but I do think is worth keeping on your radar. This is Avishkar Runway. This has Start Your Engines, which was the signature mechanic, as well as Exhaust for Aetherdrift. And it says, when you have no speed, you start with 1 speed, and then it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life, and you reach max speed at 4. So you play this, it starts your engines, you start at 1. If you deal damage, it immediately ticks up to 2. And then 2 more turns of that later, you get to 4. Now, it is worth noting this is on each of your turns an opponent loses life, so you can't say, like, do it on your turn, then ping them at the end of turn to get another speed up, but 2 turns later, you achieve max speed. This will tap for a colorless throughout that process, but once you hit max speed, you unlock a activated ability for 3 tap, discard a card, you can draw a card. Now, the reason I wanted to bring this up was because I think it's going to be kind of a sleeper land for something like maybe Red Dredge, maybe Rakdos Madness, although I'm not 100% sure that can afford a colorless land. But if it can find room for 1 or 2 of these, and you're able to kind of slow the game down a little bit, maybe you've gassed out or your opponent has tried to stabilize and you're trying to play the long game and assemble lethal or come up with a line to try to dig your way out of it, this card has a lot of value in that longer, grindier game plan. And then in the Red Dredge list, you actually get a lot of value out of this because you have lots of little ways to kind of chip in damage with the Scrapwork Mutts and the Sneaky Snacker is kind of just pinging for 2 here and there, so you will eventually hit this max speed. And then the ability to rummage, discard a card, and draw a new card in Red Dredge also allows you to trigger your Dredge effects and kind of throw away your Lotleth Giant or your Dread Return that's stranded in your hand if you missed with a Burning Inquiry or something like that. So I think there's a lot of value here. It is a little bit slow, so it does require kind of that mid-range value-ish orientation for a deck to really utilize it. But I think if that exists, then this card is a good one to kind of have in the memory bank when you're looking at options for designing your list.
Yep.
Josh, I'll pass it off to you there. Do you have anything that jumps out to you about this card?
Yeah, this card has always made me think that, especially in a set with vehicles, that Okiba Reckoner raid stocks would go up. Just hasn't happened yet, though. So I'm
no, it hasn't.
I'm gonna keep popping my copium and say yet there.
Okay, fair enough. I'm not 100% sure vehicles and the saga flips are really where we want to be for this, but maybe it'll end up surprising me. I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again.
It's not exclusively for the flip side of it. It does get Menace, but it is more so for the Drain one.
Yeah, just the ping.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Just to keep getting your feet up for relatively low cost.
All right, well, that is it for our Aetherdrift set review. Thank you so much for watching. Josh, thank you so much for hanging out. And as usual, guys, thank you so much for tuning in and hanging out with us today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of look back over the Aetherdrift playables. A little bit different format for this type of set review on the channel. Let me know down in the comments if you guys liked this format. You want a more kind of introspective discussion of cards that see play after the fact, or after a month or a couple months have passed, versus predictions of something that might be playable. As usual, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and goodbye forever, unless we see you next time. Peace.
I've got it. We call it a setrospective.
A setrospective, huh?